Warning, this content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. This video is brought to you by First Detachment Nutrition. Battle tested, expert formulated. Use discount code AB10 at checkout for 10% off. All right, Gym Bros, it's Big Paul here today. We are going to talk about injection frequency and steroid or TRT active lives, and how often you should inject, and how long it takes for things to clear out, how long it takes for things to peak, what your injection schedule should look like, and we're going to talk about how stupid some of the stuff that TRT doctors and regular physicians recommend for injection schedules is, and I'm going to show you why. We're going to plot it all out. We'll see what it looks like, and we'll talk about that in just 1 second. All right, so I get a lot of people that ask me, how often should I be doing my injections? And there is this preconceived notion that if you use longer testosterone esters or steroid esters, whatever you're running, that you don't need to inject that often. And that is going to work just fine for you. And I'm going to show you why it's probably not a good idea to have your injections spread out so far, and how to cut down on side effects from doing more frequent injections. I have been microdosing everything daily, and I'm going to show you why that works well and why the TRT recommendation that a lot of medical doctors make, like I see doctors recommend that you do a test sip shot once a week, or I've even seen some, like some of the places in Europe, I've heard of guys in Europe or medical doctors in Europe, I've had clients where their doctors have told them once every 2 weeks to do a shot. And that is just utterly insane to me that a medical doctor would recommend that and have you in a hormonal yo-yo. What ends up happening when you do things that way is you have these huge spikes and dips in your hormone levels. You end up having a lot of spillover with your testosterone as estrogen and DHT, and when you have more steady levels and you are slowly titrating things up and you're doing more frequent injections, you have less side effects because you don't have as much estrogen conversion or DHT conversion. At least that's my theory on it. At least that's what I've seen. All right, so let's take a look at testosterone cypionate here, and we'll do a injection schedule of once every 7 days like most doctors recommend. Sometimes I've even seen it be 2 weeks. So let's look at every 7 days. Let's see what this looks like as far as a dosing schedule goes and what you get with peaks and valleys of doses. And I'm going to run it for 16 weeks just as an example so you can see how long it takes for it to clear your system. So we see here, this is once every 7 days, once every 7 day shot. So our first shot, we have a peak, then a dip. Our second shot, a peak, then a huge dip. We almost drop our levels in half. Peak, then dip. And then we sort of hit around peak concentration. Actually, it's almost peak concentration at day 28. We were pretty close at day 21. So it takes about 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks with SIP for you to hit peak concentration. It's going to tail off the same at the end. So if we're stopping, we can look here. So we are down to basically 0 at day 139. So, and we are at peak at day 105. So we're talking about a little over a month for it to clear your system. So these idiots that do PCT right after they're starting, you still have suppressive compounds in your system. This doesn't really make much of a difference. So we're looking at about, in theory, you would want to start your PCT if you're going to do PCT. That's a whole other case. At about 30 days after, it would make sense to do it somewhere around 30 days when your the exogenous testosterone has cleared your system. So let's take a look at the every 2 week dosing, 2 week dosing that I see a lot of TRT or doctors not do for TRT in Europe. Here's an example of this. Now look how awful these peaks and valleys are. You're almost back down to zero. And I guarantee you the person that's doing it this way feels great, then they feel awful. Then they feel great, then they feel awful. And then they feel great, then they feel awful. Let's move to a twice a week injection schedule, which seems to be what most bros like to do. That's what I hear. This is better, but you still have all these peaks and valleys in here where your hormones are up and down. My way, I microdose daily. So let's pull it down to, I'm not adjusting the doses here, but it's still, the result's the same. But let's look at it. Let's look at it every day. Let's go with something like 50 milligrams every day. See how you have the nice even levels, a nice even peak going up, and everything is stable once you hit the top here. So what this tells us is that you are going to have more stable levels. You're probably going to feel better. Anecdotally, experiencing it myself, I can tell you that I feel better when I'm running daily dosing. I don't have all the side effects. I've noticed that estrogen levels seem to stay lower. I don't have the spillover into estradiol like I would. The aromatization seems to be lower when you don't have these huge peaks. The body does seem to strive for some sort of homeostasis at all times. So let's take a look at another compound. So I get a lot of guys that say, you know what, I want to come off for 6 or 8 weeks, come completely off. And I'm going to show you why it makes almost no sense. A lot of dudes run equipoise in the off season or DECA. And, you know, they're like the old school bodybuilding philosophy. Like I heard Jay Cutler talk about it, how he ran EQ mostly in the off season, and then he would come off for 8 weeks and take a break and come completely off. Well, I hate to break it to you, but he was not completely off. So let's take a look at equipoise. Let's do a 16-week blast of equipoise. We'll do every other day injections. We'll just say he did 200 milligrams every other day, or let's go with 300. That's more of a bodybuilder dose. Let's go 300 milligrams every other day. And so you can see here, this is when the equipoise, how long it takes for it to peak. It takes almost, so we're at day 0 here. It doesn't really hit, I mean, here we're pretty close. We're probably like at 90 or 95%. But really, we're not at peak concentrations until we hit about day 85. So it takes almost 3 months for equipoise to fully peak. I mean, we're at, I would say, 90% of it here at day 36. So we're at least a month before we're at 90%. And for it to completely clear, so we're at day 95 when we do our last injection here. And for it to completely clear, to come back down to 0, back down to close to 0, almost 0, we're like day 190. So it takes about 3 months for equipoise to completely clear. Now we're probably 90% cleared, I would say here in this range. It's day 155 from day 109. So we're talking about almost 2 months for equipoise to get a 90% reduction in your blood. So when these guys were coming off for 8 weeks and then going back on, they weren't really off. They weren't cycled off. They were completely off. And doing PCT during this time is just an absolute waste of time. So you might as well just blast and cruise at this point. Instead of creating a crash like this, you still have suppressive compounds in your system. You're not going to have any recovery of HTPA while these suppressive compounds are in your system. It's just, you know, doing PCT while this is still in your system is essentially like pissing on a forest fire. It's not really going to do much of anything. Let's take a look at DECA. We'll take a look at nandrolone and see how long that takes to clear your system. So we'll go with decanate. We'll go a 16-week blast of DECA. Let's take a look at that. DECA peaks a lot faster than equipoise, but I know a lot of guys like to run equipoise in the off season. So we are at day 0 here. It is about 90% at day 21. So about 3 weeks. And then for it to fully peak, we're at day 42. So a little over a month for DECA to fully peak. We stopped our cycle at day 110. And for it to hit about 90%, we are at 136. So almost a month after you come off for it to get down to 90%. For it to completely clear, we're at 162. So you're talking about 60 days once again for DECA to completely clear your system. So these old school bodybuilders that said, I cycled off 8 weeks every year for my health. I came completely off and I didn't lose anything. Well, no shit, you didn't lose anything because you weren't really off. Let's take a look at orals. So dosing of orals. This is another one. Let's take a look at Anavar. And let's see every day. Let's do once a day dosing of, let's say, 50 milligrams of Anavar. We'll map it out for 16 weeks. So you can see these crazy peaks and valleys with Anavar here. Now Anavar clears quickly. It has a very short half-life. So let's move it to let's move it to twice a day. You can see here it's much more stable at twice a day. So these are going to clear quickly, the orals. And this is why, like, a lot of times you'll hear guys say that you should do Anavar for a first cycle. And this is why I speculate that it's not as suppressive and people recover from it quickly, because you can look at it. We're at peak here. We finished up at day 111, and we're back to 0 at day 115. So it's cleared in a couple days, 4 or 5 days. You're completely clear. Let's take a look at Tren. Tren is another one, and a lot of guys like to run a Tren. The parable, and they don't have the ester in here, so I can't calculate it. But Tren Hex has a super long half-life. It's something similar to equipoise. And that's why a lot of times, like, guys don't say they get the same side effects from Tren Hex, is because it hasn't peaked yet. It's a very slow peak. It's not there. But let's take a look at enanthate. We'll see how long enanthate takes to hit. Most of the time when you're running Tren, you're running it in shorter runs. So let's say something like 8 weeks. We'll do 50 milligrams of Tren every other day. And you can see here, this is the enanthate. We start at day 0 here, and we're at peak at around day 24. So it takes about 3 weeks for it to peak. And this is why I like guys, a lot of times, like when people ask me about Tren, I like to run Tren acetate. So it gets in quick, we get it out quick. If you run into any problems, you're not stuck with it. So we look here, we're at peak at day 54. This is our I'm sorry, not peak, but this is where we've cut off our cycle at day 54. And let's see how long it takes for it to clear. We're probably at about 90% at day 72. So if you run into serious issues like with impotence or anxiety or insomnia really bad, so you day 72 to day 54, so you're looking at 18 days there for it to get down to a 90% reduction. And for it to completely clear, we're talking about, let's see here, we're talking about 0 right here, day 99. So we're talking about over a month. You're stuck with it. Now, getting down to 90% is probably good enough to make most of the symptoms subside. So we want to run acetate. Let's take a look at acetate. You can see here with Tren Ace, every other day, you're still going to get the huge peaks and valleys. So with Tren Ace, a lot of times I'll tell guys every other day just because people don't want to do every day, but ideally you should be doing it every day. Watch the difference here with every day. You don't have these huge peaks and valleys. Now look how quickly we are hitting peak concentration here. We are at peak concentration at day 6 versus 20 or 30 days later. In quick, out quick. Our last shot, let's go here, is day 55. We are completely back down to 0 at day 68. So a little over a week and a half, 2 weeks, something like that. We're at 90% at like 3 days afterwards with 90% reduction. So if you run into trouble with tren, you can get it in and out quickly with tren acetate. With your testosterone esters, it doesn't really matter. You just pick one ester, stick with it, unless you're trying to drop. I know some guys like to reduce their testosterone or bring it down to 0 at the end of contest prep, so then you may want to switch to a prop ester halfway through. But otherwise, just run the same testosterone ester year-round. That's what I do. I usually run just an athlete year-round. All right, guys, hopefully this shows you why daily injection frequency makes the most sense. Hopefully this shows you why we want to allow time for things to clear out before we start PCT. If you're going to come off, why the old school way of saying, well, I'm coming completely off for 6 to 8 weeks and doing a PCT is just butt stupid and makes zero sense. It's just bro science. And maybe the way that makes more sense is to blast and cruise, or if you're going to come off and you really want to recover, you probably need to come off for a long time, something like 6 months. So, lesson learned here, more frequent injections. Daily microdosing is probably the best for the lowest side effects. For toxic compounds, things that cause huge amounts of side effects like trenbolone, we want to run fast esters. For our testosterone, probably just a regular old medium acting ester we want to run. When we're considering things like DECA and equipoise, we have to think about how long it takes for those to clear our system and how long it takes for them to peak. I personally prefer NPP over DECA because it peaks faster. But anyway, guys, I appreciate you watching. If you want to support me, please support my sponsor, First Detachment. They make quality supplements designed by the man himself, Justin Harris. Link is in my profile. Thank you for watching. Please leave a comment below. For coaching or consultations, head over to www.anabolicbodybuilding.com to book your spot today. I can help you with optimizing hormones, fat loss, muscle gain, physique, athletic performance, nutrition, and health. For more information, shoot me an email at bigp3rd@gmail.com.